Hello, everyone. I am Eric Wells, and welcome to Faces of NextGen Live, the NextGen Genealogy Network's live interview show on YouTube, in which we get to interview genealogists from all over the world and get to know them a lot better. Like I said, I'm the host, Eric Wells, and I am the education coordinator for the NextGen Genealogy Network, and my company is Legacy Left Right. So today, I'm really excited to interview this gentleman. You guys all know who he is. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome James Morgan III. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Eric. A pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on with me. You and I, this is like the first time that we've actually met. We've got a mutual friend who introduced us to one another.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I was very happy to be and excited to be invited on, and been looking forward to this. So let's get it rocking.
All right, let's do this. So one of the unique things that I read in your bio is that you are a Freemason, and that's something that I have very little experience with. So I'd love to talk about that some little later on.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
So how old are you?
I'm 28, originally from New Jersey, and one of the things that really got me interested in my family's history early on was that I was very acutely aware that my family was not from New Jersey originally. Both of my parents were just a few years removed from the deep South. They were both born in the Northeast, but all my grandparents were Southerners and everything. And, so that kind of got me really interested in learning the history of the American South and to really know and learn where my roots really came from,
And when was this? Like, how old were you when you started doing this?
Oh, man. I mean, honestly, some of my earliest memories are in Alabama. Believe it or not, and a lot of my research is focused there because both of my mother's parents are from Alabama. My father's parents are from Virginia on my grandmother's side, and North Carolina on my paternal grandfather's side. So, but my earliest recollections really are spending a lot of summers in Alabama in the heat. Everybody was my cousin or my auntie or this one or that one. And so I really have a lot of fond memories down there and whatnot. So that really got me interested, especially as I got older, in researching the family, because I knew that even though I didn't know all the narrative like I might know it now, I knew enough to know that my roots, the beginning of my story, were in this one little area in the southeastern corner of the state. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So what do you do for a day job?
I work for the Department of State. I'm one of the people who's still working there right now. I plan to work tomorrow, so that's all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah, you haven't fired yet. Well, that's good.
Yeah, right.
And what was we talked a little bit about before the show started. What was kind of interesting is that you got your government job after like 10 days after you submitted your resume.
Yeah, don't tell anybody that.
Okay, I won't. All right, so moving on. You're also a graduate of Howard University.
Yes, sir. If you can't tell.
I can't tell at all.
Yeah. I went to Howard. Graduated class 2011. I am a Bison. I bleed Bison blue. And again, honestly, even in that experience, I wouldn't say that I was a super serious genealogist at that time, but I was definitely kind of dabbling with it at that point. And even in that experience, I would find people with, I was very conscious about my last name being Morgan. So I met a couple people who share my surname. Hey, where's your family from? I ask people that all the time because I'm genuinely curious. So that was another experience where, again, that love of history and finding out where other people were from and how we were connected, really sparked my interest to get more serious with genealogy.
What did you graduate with?
I graduated. They gave me my bachelor's degree. I do have that. It's on the wall over there.
Yeah, I see a bunch of that stuff over there.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, with my degree is in mass communications and African American history, and so I like communicating about African American history.
I would assume that you've been to the new museum.
Yes. Yeah. I've been there. I've been to that museum 9 times, and I'm going a 10th time next week. I have some family coming in town that's going to be staying with me. So yeah, I've been there enough to make me nauseous to think about it. But I
And
love
it's
it.
only been open like 2 years or so, or less than 2 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, September will make 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, actually, funny enough, I was actually a part of uh, a marketing focus group of like community scholars and whatnot that went in before the museum was actually opened. We did that maybe about, I want to say maybe like 2 or 3 months before the actual opening, and we sat down and they ran through the tour with us and the exhibits and stuff. So I got to see it beforehand. Then because I did that, they gave me tickets to go to a pre-opening the week before. Then I was there the opening day, and then I become everybody's designated driver that's in my family since. And all my Facebook, and it's funny, like all my Facebook and Twitter, all my social media friends hate me because they go, "How did you get tickets? How did you go?" State secrets.
I was in DC in the July of 2016, and
Right.
it hadn't quite opened yet. And I really wanted to see it, but it's like, it hasn't opened yet.
Yeah.
But,
it's beautiful, And one thing I will say, I am happy that they did put a genealogy kind of resource center there. Yeah. There's I think it's on the second or third floor, if I'm not mistaken. And so that right there again, it showed me that was something I did appreciate. I have my critiques, which I'll say for now, but that was something I did appreciate because that's, to me, I think one of the defining things about the African American community is like when Roots came out back in the 70s.
Oh no! Well, looks like we've lost James or something. Okay, well, until he comes back. Oh, here he is. You back?
I am back. I don't know what happened.
I don't either.
I hope it wasn't Russian hacking. Anyway, sorry about that, folks. I've been having computer issues all night, so to the viewers, please excuse me, please. But as I was saying, that when Roots came out back in the 70s, of course I don't know anything about that. I was not alive, but I know that it touched a nerve, right? And so when you go into the museum, especially for folks of African descent, the one thing that I kind of gathered was the idea of the scattering of communities, scattering of families, and what kind of ripple effect that has had through space and time. And I think genealogy is a way for people who've experienced that on a mass scale to be able to go back and try to reclaim some of that history and indeed some of their humanity, actually.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I haven't quite experienced that scattering like so many African American families have,
Right.
And to have the Smithsonian kind of recognize that and have the whole genealogy center to help bring those pieces back together, and that's what I really love about genealogy, is how it brings like we are the organizers of all of this scattered. We make the sense out of the random records and stuff. So
absolutely. And the funny thing to me is, like, you can see how in genealogy, how one choice that somebody makes can end up impacting so much. It's a domino effect all these years later. It's like, okay, if, for example, I'll just give you one example. If my grandmother on my father's side, she never decided to come up and visit her brother John in New Jersey for the summer, she wouldn't have been at the hotel where she met my grandfather. And then he found out she couldn't drive, so he taught her how to drive. And then, long story short, my father came and then I came. What if she had never made that choice? You wouldn't have an episode to do tonight because I wouldn't be here.
I know. We would have never met because we would have never been born.
Exactly. We've never been born. It puts us in the twilight zone, so it's really crazy when you think about it. But to me, on a more down to earth level, it also shows you how precious life is also, I think.
Yeah.
Because you just never know how, you read these crazy stories about, like, oh, Uncle Johnny, he went down there for a drink at the river, and then the lightning struck him and he died. It's like, it sounds funny, but it's like, no, Uncle Johnny died because he went down there. What if he'd have stayed home that night?
Right.
You know what I mean? You just never know.
It almost seems like history is kind of a funnel, That just, in some sense, can narrow down to fewer and fewer options and things like that.
Absolutely.
Where you and me are results of such decisions in
Absolutely.
history. Well, you've been doing your genealogy and researching for quite a long time. Who would be one of the ancestors that you would love to meet the most?
Oh man, who would I love to meet most? There's so many of them. I would say probably number one would probably be one of the first ones. And when I say first, I mean like deep history that I learned, which would be Reverend William Jefferson Hightower. That would probably be my number one. Long story short, I learned about
Hightower.
Yeah, Reverend Hightower. He was. In fact, let me see if I can pull a picture up of him for you real quick. He's my great three times great grandfather, and I learned about him when I was 6 years old from my granddad actually. And what happened was that, long story short, this was the first time in my recollection that I had met my mother's father, and what ended up occurring was that he took me to this big church, and of course I'm 6 at the time, so everything is big. And he says, he takes me to this church, and he tells me, he says, James, this church was built by my great grandfather, your ancestor, and at that time, white people didn't want us to have a church. They didn't want us to have much of anything, and so always remember that this is where you come from, and blah blah blah. And at the time, I was 6. I said, okay. I'm like, okay, why do you have me at a church on a day in the summer when I should be at the pool? You know what I mean? That was my thought at 6 years old. However, that story kind of stuck with me about this church that was built, and white people didn't want him to have a church, and like, well, in my mind, not thinking about the racial politics and stuff of the era, for me it was like, okay. Matter of fact, here, hold on, Eric, I'm pulling up his. I'm gonna do a screen share with you real briefly so you can see
Cool.
what it looks like. Let's see here. Don't you just love how I come on your show and just try to take over?
Well, you know what you do. You know how to do this kind of stuff, because
Right.
we'll get into that a little bit later.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, here let me see. It's not. It doesn't. Now he doesn't want to pop up. But I'll get you the picture. But anyway,
all right.
Long story short, with Reverend Hightower, he was a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and he was Here he is. You see him?
Yes.
Yeah, that's him. That's my my great grandfather right there. And at the time I hadn't even seen his face, right? And so to go into the genealogy side of it, I bet you there's something that's sticking out to you right now. I don't look anything like him. But we'll get to that.
What time period is this?
His life and death dates were he was born January the 12th, 1868, and he passed August the 2nd, 1935. Yeah.
Just years after the Civil War, then.
Yeah. He was born. His mother was a former slave, and his father, that's listed on his birth certificate, is not his father.
Oh.
And yeah. So long story short, what happened was Reverend Hightower was an AME minister, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and he came to Dothan. He was originally from Barber County, Alabama. He came to the city of Dothan, which is in Houston County, the southeastern corner of the state, and he decided that he wanted to knock down the old church that was there, originally called Gaines Chapel, and reconstruct it with a newer building. He raised money and all this type of stuff. And the brick factory in the city would not sell him bricks because he was black. Yeah. And so the story goes that he actually called together a meeting of the black community and basically said, look, I need bricks and I don't care where y'all get them from. And so they started taking bricks. We'll say they were liberating bricks from work sites and abandoned buildings. And because the brick factory in town at the time only made red bricks, they all matched. So he didn't pay for any bricks at all. He used the money to pay for supplies and pay the men that worked. And there for years, there's actually a mural down there in the city now of this story, telling it in visual form, right? And for years, I mean, there are elders. There's still a couple around who will call it where they had to get bricks on their way to school, on their way home, wherever, all this type of thing. And to hear that story years and years from my grandfather, it was like, wow, this church now is considered the mother church of the African Methodist Episcopal denomination in the state of Alabama. It's a historical landmark. They got a big sign there and everything. And to know my direct ancestor had something to do with that, that was crazy. But then this is the other side of it, not just dealing with his life, but going back into my family's history. Back in about maybe 2011, 2012, I had, I was just kind of getting serious with my genealogy studies. And I was on the phone with my grandfather. I was telling him about something I had found about Reverend Hightower, because for the longest time, this was just the stories as far as I was concerned. I wanted the documentation.
Yeah.
And at the time, I had very little. Now I have more than I know what to do with, thankfully. I said to my grandfather, I said, Granddad, it would be really great if we had a picture of him. I would love to know what he looked like. And he goes, a picture? He goes, I got one of them. I have a picture. And he emailed it to me right then. And I said, well, when were you going to give this to me? He said, you didn't ask for it. He said, just like that. He said, just like that. You didn't ask me for it. You never asked. So then that made me start asking more about what else he had and picture forms and other things like that. But when I got the picture,
lesson learned, huh?
Exactly, lesson learned. That's lesson number 1 of tonight, everybody. Don't assume that your family doesn't have anything. Ask them first. But he sent me that picture, and if you can't tell, I look pretty black, pretty African, pretty much, right? Yeah. And Reverend Hightower, to my eyes, didn't, and for me to see this direct, like, it's one thing to have for me, and I don't know how it is, like, because I don't think other groups of people have the same dynamic with skin complexion as much, maybe with hair color or something.
Sure.
But, in black families, you have light skin, dark skin, all type of things, right? But for me, I come from a pretty brown black family, at least today. Mm-hmm. So to see this picture of this guy, I said, what in the world? I said, Granddad, I don't look anything like him. What in the world? And he goes, well, James, that's because his daddy was white. And that was a moment, because I always had assumed that it was there, but this was the first time that I can recall that I really saw it. And it was like, okay, there's some mixed race ancestry going on in my family. And that sent me on his ancestry alone sent me on an adventure, not just his life, the life of Reverend Hightower, but his ancestry and whatnot. Once I was able to find out who his father was and the whole thing, that sent me on an adventure that I, really opened my eyes to how interconnected we all really can be.
Now, did you use DNA at all to help you with this?
Yeah. I've tested with I did Ancestry first, then I did 23andMe and the FTDNA. I'm on GEDmatch and all that good stuff. And that was one of my major questions, was to verify the story I had been told, which was that Reverend Hightower, his mother, like I said, was a former slave. Mm-hmm. His father, whose name was Robert Tarplin Hightower, his father was, of European ancestry, and that Reverend his parents, somehow they struck some kind of an accord where Reverend Hightower was actually raised in his father's house for the most part. He was not prevented from seeing his mother. His mother lived about 5 or 10 miles away, but he spent his day-to-day life as a child in his father's house among his legitimate children and his wife and all that type of thing, and that he was trained in brick masonry and carpentry, and eventually he got the religious bug, right? And so to me, that was like, wait, this guy did what? He raised this child, and then he taught him some stuff, and it's post Civil War, but it's still like, it's just an amazing story. Yeah. But it's one that happens so often that people don't. I'm not going to speak for white America. I don't know that white America talks about that the way Black America does. That's kind of a commonplace dynamic in Black genealogy. So once I was able to find that story out, and I got the DNA results, I start looking for Hightowers. I'm looking for other surnames and things. And to my amazement, I found some white and Black ones that I was connected to. Really? And that was a real interesting thing to add to my research. I always tell folks, when in doubt, DNA.
Right. Right. When you were doing your DNA research, did you find that you got some resistance from folks like responding to you, or even
Um,
kind of denying that there was a relationship at all? Because I've got some distant black cousins who had through a similar situation like what you're describing. They've been reaching out to like it was like maybe 15 or 20 to 1 or people they reached out to that contacted them.
right, right.
So, did you
Um,
kind of have a similar struggle?
Honestly, it was kind of, at least in my Hightower research, it was actually kind of the reverse. I got more resistance before I did the DNA testing. When I was just reaching out to people, whether it was like social media or like
Got it.
I researched, like the family had like some genealogists and people out there and whatnot, and I would reach out to them via email and everything. And I won't say the person's name, but I got a very rude response from one person who at the time I believed myself to be related to. Now I know I'm related to him, but we haven't spoken in years. but when I did the DNA testing, honestly, no. The white cousins, particularly on, and I will say specifically on the Hightower side of my family, were actually very welcoming. They were very open and kind of proud for the most part,
Good.
which I was kind of surprised about. You know, and I don't want to say, part of me, I'm not going to lie, part of me thought it was, well, maybe it's because I'm telling them about this historic black guy and he did all this amazing stuff and whatnot. But I think part of it really was the fact, like I had like one relative I have who's down in, because what happened was the white side of the family, a lot of them moved to Texas. So one relative, when I sent her the picture, she goes, "Oh yeah, he's one of us." She was like, "Yeah."
Just immediately knew it.
Yeah, she saw it. She was like, she looked at his forehead. She looked at this, looked at this. She said, "Yeah, he looks like my uncle." Like that's, yeah. She didn't
I
even.
love
There
it.
was no question. So that was kind of cool. Outside of that side of my family, other aspects of research, or even if I just do kind of like a shot in the dark, you know, some of us will do. We may not know the connection, but you still say, "Hey, we share a certain amount of centimorgans, whatever."
Yeah.
And I did have one person who told me, they were like, "Well, I'm white and you're black. There's no way we can be related. Please don't contact me again," or something like that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Look. Are you gonna believe me or this multi-billion-dollar company called Ancestry? I don't know which one you're gonna believe.
It's like
Whatever.
it's math, it's
Right.
statistics, and it's math, and I'm like,
It's called. Listen. It's called basic geometry. It's called shapes. But I'm not gonna get into all that because this is a family show. But it's shapes. I'll just leave it at that. We'll move on.
all right, moving on. Let's talk a little about some of your interests because you are a Freemason, and I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I don't really know a whole lot about Freemasonry. Can you maybe kind of describe it briefly, like both what Freemasonry is and what organization you're a part of? What?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm messing with you. Basically, outside of my day job, I'm the associate grand historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of DC. I know somebody's going, "What in the world is he talking about?" Basically, Freemasonry is a fraternity. It's the world's oldest and largest fraternal organization for men, and I happen to belong to the historically African American branch of it called Prince Hall Masonry. And as I mentioned, I'm a historian for the DC jurisdiction, as we would call it, and that interest has blended with my family history research. I actually was very curious because in the history, long story short, in the history of America, everything's been segregated, including social organizations, right? And so one day I just kind of sat and did the math on it and said, well, if I know that you have these different organizations that existed, white men, black men, right? All through the
Yeah.
years. And then I, because of my position and over time, have gained access to certain records and whatnot of membership and everything. I said, this is a very interesting way to try to find black men. And I happen to be a black man, right? So
Yeah.
so what I did was I started basically researching my family in Masonic records as well as other people, friends of mine, and just trying to find out, okay, hey, this is another element that you can add to your portfolio. And honestly, the very first time that I ever helped somebody else to find somebody who was a Masonic ancestor, it was really by accident. to be honest with you. Let me back up. I wear a Masonic ring every day, right?
Yeah.
And so wearing a ring, and I'm sure there's somebody in the chat room who is, I'm not looking at it right now, but I'm sure there's somebody in the chat room who's going, yeah, my grandfather was one, blah, blah, blah. Well, I get that all the time. A lot of us do, if you're into these type of organizations. So I always would have somebody come up to me and tell me that their grandfather was the Grand Master of the universe of all the Masons, and he had all the degrees, and he was this. And I'm looking at them like, no, your grandfather did not. No, he did not do all of that, but he did something, right? And this is across color lines. This was something that was across color lines. This is when I knew I kind of had hit on something, because I had white people, black people. I had black people telling me about white grandfathers, and white people telling me about black uncles, and all type of stuff. And so what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to try to see if I can find some of my own ancestors. And it's funny that we're talking about this, because I wanted to focus on Reverend Hightower. Prince Hall was actually an abolitionist from who lived in Boston in the 1700s.
So Prince Hall was a person.
He was a person, not a place. He was a person. He was a man.
Sure.
And he became one of the earliest African American Masons in American history. He was the founder of African Lodge number 459, and in 1784, that lodge, they received a charter from the Grand Lodge of England. Okay, and the way our organization kind of works is that it's like a family tree. So once your lodge and you get a Grand Lodge started, what have you, they issue charters to other states or other places, what have you, right? And at the time, Prince Hall was not being accepted by the white brothers in Boston. They kind of would associate with him, but they wouldn't fully embrace him, so to speak, to make a long story short. And so what ended up happening was he went to the Grand Lodge of England, which was the first Grand Lodge in the world, and got the charter for the lodge, which still exists. Wow. And from his one lodge, it metastasized into a movement of African American Masons. And again, this was in 1784, not 1884.
Wow.
So you had
he had to go to England in order to get in order
and the original charter still exists. It's in the possession of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. If you just go on Google, you can find it, find the whole story, find pictures of it. And so, but over time, that organization, again, this is early American history, right?
Yeah.
So, and he's an abolitionist, and so he ends up linking up. Now, check this out. He links up with somebody named Absalom Jones and Bishop Richard Allen. Now, if you're not familiar with these people, these are early founders of Black Methodism in American history. Matter of fact, Bishop Richard Allen is the founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Now, didn't I just tell you that my ancestor, Reverend Hightower, African Methodist Episcopal minister, and the two organizations really grew up hand in hand. I call them twin sisters, right? And so over time, a lot of your AME ministers are spreading the Masonic fraternity and vice versa, kind of sort of thing, right? So symbiotic relationship. So I said, one day I sat down and I called up my friend who's the historian for Alabama, and he gave me access to some of their records, their membership records. And I said, I want to find Reverend Hightower.
Mm-hmm.
And on this particular day that I'm talking about, I didn't find him. And again, Reverend Hightower is my third great grandfather, right? I found one of my fourth great grandfathers and another third great grandfather that was of this organization that I'm a part of. And I had no clue about it when I joined.
Yeah.
I uncovered that my fourth great grandfather, still on my mom's side, but it's different lineage, Joseph McBride, who actually had been born into slavery, was the earliest documented Prince Hall Freemason that I could find. And that made my jaw drop because I wasn't even looking for him.
That's so cool.
I really wasn't. I wasn't looking for him. And then I found my another third great grandfather of mine, Toby Townsend, as well. And I don't know anything about Toby Townsend to this day except that he lived. I know what church he went to. I know when he died. He had kids and he was a Mason. That's it. That's the only thing we know about him. Oh, and I know his parents. I do know his parents' names. I know his parents' names. But other than that, that's one of my brick walls, right? But to find that for me as a member was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was something that really meant something to me. And to some other people that would be something to just add to, okay, well, he was a Mason, and they move on. And a lot of people do that. I tell people, and it's not just Masons. You got the Elks, the Oddfellows, you name it. And it's, again, across color lines. You have social organizations. We obviously know the power of religion in our lives even today. But for me, I couldn't just leave it there, because again, I'm a historian of the organization my ancestors were in. So why wouldn't I go deeper? Right? And so I did. And what I was able to find was that, particularly in this case, but in a lot of cases, your ancestors are joining lodges and other things because these are their friends, and a lot of times they're interrelated. So I ended up finding out that, oh my God, when I start looking at some of these lodges, I'm finding other branches of my family I didn't know about, whether it's by blood or marriage or both. I'm finding arguments, we didn't mention it yet, but a lot of folks probably know I'm a co-panelist on Black ProGen-Live, right? And so on Black ProGen, I'm not sure if she's watching right now. I think True Lula. I do see her. True is on.
Yeah, she's here.
Yeah. So True and I, it's interesting. We both have ancestry in the same place, right? Now, what if I told you that a couple weeks ago I was doing research? Well, this is about a couple months ago now. I was doing research in some Alabama Masonic records, and I found where True's grandfather and my fourth great grandfather, Joseph McBride, were both mentioned in the same document.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Her she calls him Granddaddy Ike.
I think she talked. I interviewed her a few months ago, and she talked about how cool her Ike was.
Right. Now check this out. So what happened was, this letter was written by a man named Elbert G. Humphrey, and his title, he was the Grand Lecturer for East Alabama. So he would go through the region and he would check on the lodges, check their finances, make sure they're doing everything in line with what the organization is about, right? And if they didn't, he wrote them a nasty gram, and they got reported to the Grand Master of the state, right?
Yeah.
So as he's traveling, he wrote a letter where he stated he was thanking individuals who had donated money, who had given money to him for the Grand Lodge charity, and he specifically mentioned Ike Ivory, who was a member of Elbert Humphrey and Ike Ivory were part of the same lodge. He specifically mentioned Ike Ivory, and he mentioned Joseph McBride, and he said what lodges they were in and the dates that they gave their finance, that they gave their money. Now, to most people, they may not care, but what are the odds that all these years later, myself and True would actually be friends? And you just never know, right? And then come to find out, Elbert Humphrey's great granddaughter went to college with me. So it's like, what are the odds of that one document showed that there was some kind of a connection, over 100 years ago to somebody who, you know what I mean? It's really amazing. So, I've come to find out that in researching your family's network, you have to research their social networks. Mm-hmm. You have to. Before they had Facebook, they still had social networks, and that's something that I kind of have come to specialize in over time, particularly with fraternal organizations.
This is a fantastic story.
Thank you.
Now, going on more about Prince Hall, you have a Prince Hall think tank. That's your YouTube channel. You and a few other folks.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And what basically happened with that was that myself and a couple of others, Brother Antonio Caffey from Ohio being the main lead on it, we decided that we wanted to share some of the information and bring our talents together, and also highlight leaders of our organization today, because a lot of people, again, this is a cross color line. They look at organizations like the Masons and the Elks and Oddfellows, and I do I actually talk about this in my workshop, my genealogy workshop that I do on fraternal organizations. A lot of people look at it as like, oh, that's where the old men go and they drink, and they're not doing anything important worth investigating. And I don't really get into the secrecy of rituals and stuff like that, but I tell people, hey, don't judge so fast, because a lot of people don't realize that in these organizations, these were the first form of insurance for a lot of our relatives. So if you're looking for when did Uncle such and such, or when did Auntie such and such die, or whatever happened to that land, or what have you, you never know. There may be a fraternal death certificate that you may be able to find on that person that you're not even looking for.
Wait, so the Masons can have a fraternal death certificate?
Not just the Masons, the Elks, Oddfellows.
Really? I didn't know that.
They would have, and even if it's not a fraternal one, because I know Texas was really big on fraternal death certificates back in the day. Even if they didn't have those type of things, they had insurance policies. A lot of your relatives, when you go back and look at obituaries, and it says, oh, they were a member of the Elks, they was in the Masons, they were this. Well, a lot of that is not just because they had free time on their hands. It's because the Masons offered dental, the Elks offered, workman's comp, as we call it today. These are the type of things that these organizations did on a very practical level. So leaving the secret ritual stuff alone, I tell folks, and I've done it myself, I go in and say, okay, if you like you mentioned earlier, the 1890 census. Well, if you know that they're part of an organization that keeps records year after year after year after year, and they report deaths, and you don't know when a person died, it can't hurt to look.
No,
right? So
not at all. That is so cool. I had no idea. So basically what you're saying is, like, not only did fraternal organizations have, like, many of them, or some of them had, like, fraternal death certificates, like this member died, but you as a member, you could purchase life insurance through them, or
burial insurance. Burial insurance was a big thing back then.
And those records would may still be in existence.
Absolutely. And the thing for me was, like, for the and I really hate saying this, but I just have to tell the truth. For the Caucasian branch of the Masons here in the States, they've been very very particular about keeping their records, their libraries, etc. For African Americans, our records exist as well. Although a lot of people don't know it, they haven't looked for it, they don't know to reach out or what have you. They do exist, and so for me to be able to go in into like I'm here in DC, for example, right?
Right.
So in DC, we have our records go back to 1848 when our Grand Lodge was started. We don't have every single year, but I can tell you we have most years. So for me, being a part of the OGS chapter of DC, that's a resource that I made sure to let people know. Hey, it's okay to reach out to us. We have a library. You can let me know. We can set an appointment up and stuff. And it's really been fun because the thing about it is, for me as the historian of the organization, I look at it as I'm helping you, but you're also helping us to fill in gaps of our members' history and things they did outside of our buildings, outside of our lodges and whatnot. So it really kind of helps me. It definitely helps me on my reports at the end of the year. They're like, they always ask, how do you get so many people coming in here to do all these family history requests? And I'm like, well, I got to make sure I'm doing my job, right? I gotta report something, so it really works out, But it's been a really big help thus far, and with and to go back to the think tank. So with the show, what we try to do is we try to highlight the history of our organization for our members, but also for the public as well, because a lot of people don't know. So, like, for example, we did an episode, and we're going to continue doing this, where we highlight specific states and we talk about how did Masons get to this area, what are some of the important things they did, the relationship with, if there was a historically Black college there or some other type of stuff that was going on. And you just never know how that may impact somebody's family history research, because at the end of the day, I've had a lot of people say to me, oh, they wouldn't have anything like that in my town this far. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm telling you, every little small town you can think of, and I don't care what color you are, if your family was here in the States, particularly after the Civil War, they had some kind of a fraternal organization or something. It may not have been the Masons. It may have been the Knights of Honor. It may have been the Woodmen. It may have been the Elks. It may have been the Pythians. Whatever the case may be, I always tell folks, try to track some of that history down too, because you would be surprised at what you may find. That
is awesome. Wow, I love it. One of the things I would love about doing this show is how much I get to learn, and this show above some of the others is just I'm learning so much, because I didn't even realize that the fraternal organizations had that those kinds of record keeping.
Right.
Wow, this is I'm actually kind of excited. I'm like, all right, let's go. I mean, we need to hang up. I have to go do some research.
Right. And a lot of people do that. But the funny thing is, I tell people, we have a cultural stigma today in our society, and I largely blame the Flintstones and the Simpsons because, but seriously, I do, because people look at like the Order of Water Buffalo and all this type of stuff on TV, and they don't realize that these were particularly for Black America. A lot of these organizations were early civil rights organizations, as well as just being generally politically active groups that your relative may have been in. And so I tell people all the time, you just never know what you'll find. I mean, that ancestor may be elusive in your records, and like in the census, let's say your standard genealogy record sets, but then when you go look in the fraternal organization, it's like, oh my God, he was never home.
Yeah.
You know, this person, they may have been, she may have been the grand loyal lady, queen of the whole state of Wisconsin, right? And you're looking like, what is this grand title? Well, she may have been the grand secretary for that state, and she managed all the finances, managed this, managed that, and
Right.
here's her reports. You know, I was helping one person do some research on a guy in Missouri, and this was at a time when Missouri for the Black Masons was administering a lot of it was administering Missouri, but also Colorado, Alabama, Louisiana. Like they had lodges in Mississippi all over the place, right? This one guy that this person was researching was the grand secretary, and he's administering all of that, handling the finances. And guess what? And the funny thing was, she asked me when we were looking through the records. She says, I would love to find something about him, you know, something that he wrote. And I said, he wrote this whole record book right here.
This is his handwriting.
And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, this whole book is because of him. Look on the cover. And you look on the cover, his name is right there. You know? I mean, you just never know. But here's my question.
Really hands it to her, like,
right. And the book we were looking at is from 1865.
Oh, geez.
You're talking about a black man, like in 1865, and you got a whole book of stuff then when you get to his report, it's telling you everything he did that year, all the places he went.
Oh, that's so cool.
He has to request reimbursement because he had to pay the ferryman 50 cents. Like, it's like,
oh my gosh,
you know, where do you find this stuff? You know, so that's what we try to do on the show. Long story short, that's what we try to do on the show is highlight our history and make it relevant, and primarily for Masonic researchers, but not just for Masonic researchers. Other folks can also tune in and enjoy, and that's youtube.com/Prince Hall Think Tank. You can check us out.
Perfect. I think we've got a link to that in the description, but I'll double check it after the show to make sure it's there. And not only that, but you also are a big part of the Black ProGen.
Yeah. And that you know, that has been a blast too, for sure. I mean, between those two, and listen, the funny thing is, so I'm here with you today. Then tomorrow we have Black ProGen. For those who after you're done watching this show, you can turn on Black ProGen tomorrow. Bing! And then Sunday we have Prince Hall Think Tank is on again. So I'm gonna be done by next Monday for sure. If
you can't find James Morgan III on YouTube, then you're not on YouTube.
Right. Exactly.
Some other site. He's all over the place.
You know what? I don't even know how I find the time, except for the fact that I genuinely love family history, and you know, as much as I love talking about my own research, I love hearing about what other people are working on. And so, you know, whether it's, you know, watching other episodes from your show, watching or listening to other panelists on Black ProGen, you know, I'm in awe. Like a lot of people have been like in awe of me, and I'm like, you don't understand how in awe I am of people like True, you know, of people like Genealogy Gen, who's one of our main folks who comes on there on Black ProGen and stuff. You know, I'm in awe of the research other people are doing, and I just try to fit in where I can, you know. And to me, that's the really cool thing. I think now about genealogy more than ever is I don't understand how you can be on social media and not be a genealogist, because, you know, if you can stalk your ex-boyfriend for 10 months, not that we're endorsing that you do that, but if you can do that, you can find a second cousin twice removed, right? You know, and honestly, like, I think that's really the thing that's really been the joy for me now. Like, I saw one of the I'm trying to remember who it was. I think Margaret Crimes earlier. She mentioned on your chat. She said that she had Hightowers from Georgia and Alabama, and I go, there's probably a connection somewhere, you know, but we may not connect if it's not for social media. And I hope she reaches out to me because I want to hear about her Hightowers.
Cool.
Yeah.
You heard it over here, Margaret. Get in touch with James here.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear about our Hightowers. Yeah, but I mean, to me, you know, that's the really exciting thing about this time now for genealogy and whatnot. You know, I tell folks, to me, I look at Ancestry.com as like a social media site. A lot of people don't put that together, but I mean, once you do DNA, it's like, look, you got all these relatives. Why not message? Why not change, you know, numbers and talk and try to figure out what happened to your grandfather got struck by lightning down by the well? You know, you just never know.
Now, when you first got started doing your genealogy and family history research, what if you could go back in time and tell yourself something, your younger self, something like you need to, like, this is one lesson that is super important.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell your younger self?
The one thing I would tell my younger self, and I don't know if I've ever said this on recording, but I would say it now. I honestly wish that I would have started like a genealogy group when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did do it. It's funny. I did like 2 genealogy workshops when I was in college. Actually, I had I remember never forget this one genealogy assignment that I had from one of my professors, Dr. Charles Johnson. But I really wish I'd started like a club or something, because I think about having gone to Howard, which is the premier HBCU in the United States. I gotta make sure I put that. A lot of shameless plugs here tonight, folks.
Perfect. Bring it on.
Exactly. But I think about the level of information that could have been garnered by something like that. We could have had, whether we brought in some folks from the different DNA companies or African ancestry or what have you, different programs we could have done, and just the conversations that we could have had. I have a friend of mine, Curtis, who we went to school together from freshman year all the way through. And every time I would see him, I would say to him, I say, "Yo, Curtis, you look like my cousin Sharif." I say this all the time, right? I'm going to send him this video actually, so he can see that I'm talking about it. And then what happened was, when I started doing my family research, I was talking to a relative in Florida, and she goes, "When did you graduate Howard?" And I said, "Oh, about 3 years ago." And she goes, "Oh, you must have graduated with my nephew." And I said, "Well, who's your nephew?" And she said, "Curtis, my friend Curtis." And I go, "Wait, he is my relative?"
Oh my gosh.
And it was like the craziest thing ever.
Oh my gosh.
I had known this guy for years, and I reached out to him and said, "Hey, dude, we're actually related." And he was like, and I still have the Facebook message. He responded and he said, "Let me guess, I'm related to your cousin Sharif." I said, "Yeah, you are. You're on the same line."
You punk?
Right. I'm amused by it. And he was like, I know he's probably annoyed to hell with me about it, but they look. The only thing is, my friend Kurt, he's a little shorter, but they have the same face, and I could see that. This is over 10 years ago now. I could see that visually, but never had taken the time to sit down with him. And I mean, if we had talked, his mother and them, they knew my mom and this one and that one, but he and I never talked about it. We didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's how, it's funny. Like, you can walk by your relative, and some of us know you can even marry your relative. But I know folks know what I'm talking about.
Do like a DNA test before you propose, type of thing.
I definitely endorsed that. And I did. And actually, myself and the missus, we did. We both DNA tested. We did. No, she told me, because I got more into like. I got more into seriously. I got more into like the family research side. She has a family tree and whatnot. She's interested, but I'm the one that's like up at 2 a.m, trying to find a census record or something. And she told me straight. She said that the moment I found any ancestors in her part of Louisiana, that she was calling it quits. She was dead serious about that, and to this day we've not found any connection. So everything's well in the Morgan household. Everything's well over here.
Yeah, DNA makes the relationship stronger, I guess.
Absolutely, no pun intended.
So, do you go to conventions, or you talked about giving some talks and stuff? Where are you gonna be next?
Absolutely. You know what's funny? I don't know yet. I don't know what the next thing I'm going to. I haven't looked at my calendar, but I'm sure I'm going to be doing something this summer. I'm going to try to get out to Salt Lake City at some point in the near future, and I might head up to Iowa this summer for a research trip also. But I really don't know what the next convention is. We just had the OGS chapters here in the DMV area. For those who don't know, DMV is DC, Maryland, Virginia.
Is it really?
Educating. We're getting your flame together. DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. Those chapters every February have a Black History Month genealogy conference at the Family History Center in Laurel, Maryland. So I was just there. I didn't speak or do a workshop or anything, but I go there every year. I really wanted to go to Roots Tech this year, but I'm part of this Masonic research organization called the Phylactis Society, which those two clash schedule wise. And so I went to the organization I'm a part of, and I won an award, so that's always good. And
what'd you get the award for?
I'm now I'm now considered an honorary fellow of the society for my historical writing.
Cool.
I'll briefly mention this. Because I'm actually writing a book on this that's started from a research paper, which started from a genealogy question. So we started with a genealogy question, turned to a research paper, which now is turning into a book. So you see, folks, genealogy pays off, right? So basically what happened was that a friend of mine, Denisha Swanigan, who's a genealogist, she and I hooked up on a Facebook group called Our Black Ancestry. If you're not aware of it, it's probably because you're not Black, but I think everybody Black who's doing family research is on that. No, seriously, like the group, I'm an admin for the group now, and it's like we've got like 40,000, almost 40,000 members or something. It's like ridiculous, right?
On Facebook?
Yeah, it's on Facebook. Yeah,
I'm a part of it.
You're part of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't seen your DNA results today, so we're not really sure, Eric. You might have some soul with you. I don't know.
I'll throw them up there, and
there you go. Hey, we might, we don't know. You might have some, I see it. I can see a little bit. but in any case, on Black ProGen, on Our Black Ancestry, Denisha, I was getting these questions a lot back at that time, especially about Masonic rings and things that people had and stuff like that. But she had something very interesting. She had a document from her ancestor, or from her uncle, J.J. Bruce, to her other uncle, Senator Blanche K. Bruce. Notice how I said senator.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of these Reconstruction era senators, if those who aren't aware. And the letter itself really didn't have any Masonic significance, but it was on Masonic letterhead. It was from like 1870 or something like that. And so she didn't really know what that all meant, but I could look at it and tell exactly what it meant and when it was from and all this type of stuff. And so we kind of, did some research on that. Her uncle JJ was the grand treasurer for the whole state, and that, that was cool. But then she had another document, which was really interesting. This other document was a newspaper clipping about her uncle Henry Bruce, who had been shot in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And it talked about how a guy named William D. Matthews, who a lot of Civil War buffs know him, if you're big into Black Civil War history, Captain William D. Matthews and a bunch of the Masons in Kansas had went and found the guy that shot Mr. Henry Bruce, who was one of their members, and they went and found him and killed him in broad daylight in front of the sheriff.
Jeez.
And when she saw that, she was like, I don't know what to make of it. When I saw it, I got a big smile on my face because I didn't know anything about her family, but I was familiar with William Matthews. I didn't know everything about him like I know now, but I was familiar with him. And I had no clue that 3.5 years later, I'd even be sitting here talking to you about this. But that's where, and it's almost 4 years now. Basically, what we found out in our research was that some of the official story of how Black Masonry had gotten to Kansas and other places, a lot of it was wrong. And there was a specific person who did that, who was from DC, ironically. And so what we did was we researched and published that our findings on William Matthews and his Grand Lodge, which was called the King Solomon Grand Lodge of Kansas. And so I published a research paper called A Worthy Adversary, a history of King Solomon Grand Lodge from 1867 to 1877. And I was given an award for that because I basically rewrote the history of Black Masonry in the Wild West. And so that paper was published in our Phylaxis magazine. You have to be you don't have to be a Mason to be a member, but you have to be a member of the society, the Phylaxis Society, to get a copy of it. Or you can be a subscribing member. But anyway,
can we wait for the book to come out?
Yeah, of course you can. And when the book comes out, I'll be happy to come back. but I'm working on the book now, and it's about, I would say it's about maybe 45 to 50% of the way done. I'm basically telling the story of William Matthews, his Grand Lodge, and whatnot. And again, this started off with a genealogy question from a woman who really didn't know anything about the Masons, and I tell her all the time, I say, well, you probably know more about it now than a lot of people, But it started off with now. Check this out. Now here's the thing. I'm going to show you as an example. Her ancestor got shot but didn't die.
What?
He continued
in
on
front of the sheriff's office. He didn't die.
Yeah, well, he was shot in front of his home a few nights, about 2 weeks beforehand, and then the guy who shot him was killed. Right?
Oh, okay, I got it.
So in our research, we broke open. Okay, who was William Matthews? Oh, not only was he an organizer for the first Kansas Colored Volunteers, which later became the 79th USCT, we also uncovered that he was the first Grand Master for Black Masons in Kansas.
That's so cool.
And check this out. He's not related to her as far as, and she would crack up if we found out he was related to her. But check this out. In following William Matthews, we found out that he served with another one of her ancestors, Orrin Miller. Okay. And so then also in following this guy, we find out that her uncle Henry was Grand Lecturer for Kansas. He got shot. Matthews goes back and they get the guy. And there's a court. Of course, there are court cases after this. All of the men who were involved in this second shooting were acquitted. Okay, all because her uncle got shot. Fast forward a little bit. There's some internal struggle in the organization. I won't bore everybody with that tonight. But her uncle ended up being a part of a group that split off from the original Grand Lodge in Kansas, and they form a new one, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Kansas that exists today. And he eventually becomes Grand Master.
Wow!
And in tracking that, we're able to find some speeches. We found some really cool photos of different people who her ancestor was associated with. This was all off of one record that she had that kind of planted a seed, and it just birthed into this whole thing. I tell her all the time, I'm like, and she's the one. Look, I do charge, but she's the one person. I told her, I said, "You're lucky I'm not charging you because the tab would be ridiculous."
It's one person who had the key document or the key record.
Right, exactly. And you just never know. I mean, you find stuff, particularly in these fraternal organizations. It's like, okay, ancestor died on such and such a date, and here's the policy number slip. Well, you go look at the policy number. Wait, who's that? That wasn't supposed to be his wife. Who is she? You never know who or what you will find in tracking your research down.
Yeah. Well, James, this has been a fantastic talk. I can't thank you enough for sitting down with me and taking some time out of your day to talk to all of us and let's get to know you. Where can people find you on the web? We talked about Prince Hall YouTube channel and Black ProGen.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Mastermind357 is me on Facebook. I mean on Twitter. Facebook is James Morgan III. I'm all over the place. People can email me at jrmorgan919@aol.com. Again, that's jrmorgan919@aol.com. And I'm pretty accessible, I like to think. So folks can definitely reach out and we can talk, and not just about the fraternal organizations. I mean, I focused on talking about Alabama, but I didn't even get to mention, I don't know if we have time or not, but I didn't even get to mention some of the cool stuff I found on my father's side. But researching that side, I mean, I go back to the 1700s in Virginia. That's on my dad's side.
Wow.
One of the coolest things I was able to find out in my family history was I am descended from a line of free Black people, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So even finding that type of thing, you just never, you can't make the assumptions. That's another thing I'll probably tell myself when I was younger, because I just, I'm Black. Hey, slavery, it happened. We know.
Yeah.
We know the story. But to find, even though it's the only line I have found where it was free, I found a line of free Blacks that goes back to the 1700s before the American Revolution. That was, to me, was pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, you have anything else you want to say?
Do I? That's a good question. The only thing I can say is, I just appreciate everybody. Appreciate you, of course, for taking the time out and thinking so highly of me. Definitely please support Black ProGen as well as NextGen Genealogy Network, because I love what you guys are doing. Because one thing I think that is also important for people to realize is that genealogy is not just an old person sport. Like I said, I'm 28 years old. And there are a lot of people who are young adults and whatnot who are coming up. I'm inspired by one of our Black ProGen panelists, Willie Russell. He and I found out we were related, right? Well, I won't even say he and I. He figured it out through DNA that we were related, right? And so, and he's much younger than I am, but he's taking the time out to do this type of thing. So, I would just say that to support your young up and coming genealogists, because we're the future. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. We had a really lively chat in the chat room, and great conversation going in there. We will be back. Let me take a look here. On April 9th, we'll be back in a few weeks, and we're talking to Renee Schmidt. She's a teenager still in high school and has some really neat things to say as a really young genealogist and as a programmer. So I'm pretty excited to sit down and talk to her. But for tonight, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks everyone for watching. I am Eric Wells, and I'm the Education Director for the NextGen Genealogy Network. Thanks everyone, and good night.
Take care.